Bracing for Trump tariffs. Today is the day the U.S. president has been calling Liberation Day, and the countdown is on as we wait to see the next round of tariffs unveiled. Good afternoon. It's a pivotal day in Donald Trump's trade war.
In just hours, Canadians will find out more details about the tariffs Trump has in store. Let's bring in CTV's Renee Rogers. Renee, so let's set up the time, place, and setting for Trump's reciprocal tariff announcement today.
Hi, Nathan. Well, it really is just hours away. This afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern in the White House Rose Garden, U.S. President Donald Trump is set to unveil his plan for reciprocal tariffs for other countries importing goods into America. And this event that it's being called is a Make America Wealthy Again event. That's how it's actually being billed. But what we're hoping or expecting to find out this afternoon are things like exactly which countries and sectors will be impacted, when the measures will come into effect, how high they'll be, how they'll be calculated, and whether or not there will be any exemptions. Now, it isn't clear whether a pause on across-the-board tariffs is being lifted today. You'll remember that last month, Trump gave Canada and Mexico a one-month reprieve from 25% tariffs and 10% on Canadian energy. He imposed those tariffs over fentanyl. Well, that pause that went into effect is supposed to be over today, but still no confirmation from the White House on whether or not those tariffs will be imposed. This is also something we're hoping to find out this afternoon.
You know, how much anxiety is this causing around the world, do you think?
Well, it is causing extreme anxiety, in fact, Nathan, and a lot of what is causing the anxiety is all of this uncertainty. It's unclear about what these tariffs are going to look like. Also unclear how Canada is going to respond. Mark Carney has said that Canada will retaliate, but hasn't exactly laid out what exactly will be the retaliation. Now, we do know that if there are reciprocal tariffs, that is going to make life more expensive for us here in Canada. But Carney has said that any kind of reaction would minimize harm here in Canada and maximize the impact south of the border. Now, this all coming as experts warn that sweeping tariffs will harm the U.S. economy and force plants that are dependent on Canadian-made goods to shutter. We also know that, meantime, there is a push in Congress to get rid of those fentanyl-related tariffs. Today, the Senate will be voting on a bill that challenges Trump's use of an emergency declaration at the northern border over fentanyl. We'll have to see how that vote goes, but even if it does go ahead, it will still have to be voted on within the House of Representatives, which is, remember, controlled by the Republicans, Nathan.
All right, that's right. CTV's Renee Rogers with a look at Trump's announcement coming later today. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Meantime, Ontario Premier Doug Ford took to U.S. networks this morning to voice his thoughts, stating that these tariffs will impact Americans just as much as they're going to hurt Canadians. Our Queen's Park Bureau Chief Siobhan Morris is here with that side of things. Siobhan.
Whether or not there are any minds left to be changed at this point in time is a little unclear, but Doug Ford really was driving home that message this morning that tariffs do damage really on both sides of the border. This is an incredibly consequential day for Ontario. Doug Ford's been warning for months that these tariffs could cost as many as 500,000 jobs, and the effects could be felt almost immediately, especially in auto manufacturing. Ford spoke with the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick next week to try to get a sense of what Canada might be in for today, and Lutnick said he didn't know. While President Donald Trump has been calling this Liberation Day on American TV, the Premier repeated something he's been saying for a few days now, qualifying this as Termination Day.
Explain a little bit more why you call it Termination Day.
Well, we're the #1 customer. We buy more goods off the U.S. than any country in the world, more than Japan, the U.K., and France combined. And if you go after Canada, we have no choice but retaliate. And I apologize to the American people. I think we need to sit down and let's get back to a USCA deal instead of a USMCA deal, because Mexico is bringing in cheap parts from China, slapping on a Made in Mexico sticker and costing American and Canadian jobs.
It's not clear if the premier is totally aligned with the prime minister on that last point. We know that Mark Carney spoke with the Mexican president about trade and sovereignty yesterday. We do expect to hear from Doug Ford this afternoon at some point after Donald Trump makes his tariff announcement. It could be a while, though, until we fully understand what those tariffs could mean and how Ontario and Canada will retaliate. Reporting live from Queen's Park, I'm Siobhan Morris. Nathan and Michelle, back to you.
Thank you, Siobhan. And U.S. and Canadian mayors are speaking out about the economic impact of U.S. tariffs.
Toronto Mayor Olivia Chow is among those on a call this morning discussing concerns. CTV's Natalie Johnson is live at City Hall with more details. Natalie.
Well, Nathan, the message from mayors from both sides of the border this morning is that these tariffs are already having an impact on their local economies. Even though the details of the president's announcement this afternoon are still unclear, it is the economic uncertainty that is really wreaking havoc on local businesses, including manufacturers. Mayors from both Canada and the U.S. say that they are seeing local businesses contemplate layoffs as they worry about hits to their bottom line. Here's more from Mayor Olivia Chow and the Mayor of Rochester this morning.
Mayors all around the Great Lakes are speaking with a unified voice, saying the Trump tariff is going to hurt. It's going to cost us jobs. It's going to make everything expensive. It is already having an impact. And that uncertainty, that chaos is wreaking havoc. Stop it. One thing, though, because we are speaking with one voice, there's a good sense that we'll continue this alliance because that united, we are stronger.
All across New York State, these tariffs threaten a total of 55,000 jobs and about $17.4 billion in revenue. We don't need tariffs that raise the cost of low-income and middle consumers and destabilize the economy for our employers. We need thoughtful and sustainable trade policies that protect the most vulnerable residents and support job creators. So it is my hope that cooler heads will prevail.
And of course, so many industries here in Toronto, especially in manufacturing, are very reliant on cross-border trade. Experts are stressing the need to pivot to Canadian suppliers, though that kind of transition does not happen overnight. City Hall, for one, has adopted an economic action plan that includes prioritizing Canadian suppliers for municipal contracts to reduce reliance on U.S.-based goods and services. City Council has also now implemented a program that will allow industry hard hit by tariffs to defer their property taxes to improve their cash flow in the short term. That's it from now from City Hall. I'm Natalie Johnson. Back to you, Nathan and Michelle.
Thank you, Natalie. And still ahead, the iconic red canoe from Canoe Landing Park has been destroyed by fire. CTV's John Musselman will join us live with that story in just a few minutes.
But first, emergency crews are on the scene of a crash that sent 2 people to hospital with serious injuries this morning. Toronto police say a pedestrian carrying a baby was struck by a vehicle near Vaughan Road and Arlington Avenue at around 10:45 a.m. Paramedics confirmed they transported 1 adult and 1 pediatric patient with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Vaughan Road is closed in the area as crews remain on the scene.
York Regional Police have announced murder charges against 2 suspects after a deadly shooting last month in Markham. At around 6:30 a.m. on Friday, March 7th, officers responded to shots fired at a home on Solace Road. They arrived to find a man and woman suffering from gunshot wounds. The woman, 20-year-old Nilakshi Raghuthas, did not survive, and a dog was also shot and killed. Police say they took 28-year-old Aquan Murray into custody here in Toronto on March 21st, and then yesterday they arrested 35-year-old Heshmat Razuli Kalanzadeh, and the men each face several charges, including first-degree murder.
And York police are sharing dramatic footage of a home invasion in King Township as they ask for the public's help identifying those responsible. Security camera captured the moments 4 suspects broke into a home near Highway 27 and Lloydtown Aurora Road on March 27th. At least 1 person is carrying a gun. After they smashed through a glass door, police say they were confronted by someone inside and shots were fired. Nobody was hurt, and the suspects fled in a black SUV.
Well, it's an iconic piece of public art, visible to the thousands who enter or exit the city along the Gardiner.
And today, the large red canoe at Canoe Landing Park is no more after an overnight fire. CTV's John Musselman is live at Canoe Landing Park with more. John.
Hi, Nathan. Yes, Toronto Police and Toronto Fire are investigating. We'll just give you a look here of what we're dealing with. This is the big red canoe, what's left of it, as most people would see it driving along the Gardner Expressway. Now, at about 2:40 a.m., firefighters were called to the scene when the canoe was engulfed in flames. We did have a chance to see some social media video. It was fully engulfed when firefighters arrived on the scene. In fact, it spread to a bit of the grassy area on the embankment here. Now, it doesn't appear as if anyone was injured. The focus now is to try to determine how this fire started. This is the canoe was work of the artist Douglas Copeland, put into this park in 2008. Now, we have had a chance to speak to a number of residents here. They're quite upset about this, saying that it's a landmark. They bring their kids here to look at it, and they play in this nearby park. So a lot of people reacting to this story and wondering why this would have happened. And again, police and fire are investigating. We'll have much more on this story tonight on CTV News at 5 and at 6. Reporting live on John Musselman. I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, John. And we have more news in a moment, but first, here's a live look at the city this afternoon. Cool start to the day, but we are bracing for what's to come. It could get messy. There's a chance of snow, also rain mixed with freezing rain. Lots of concern, especially those north and east of us still recovering from the ice storm. Lindsay Morrison is here with a look at the current conditions. Lindsay.
Well, Nathan, we're now starting to see some of this active weather move into extreme southwest Ontario. There's a big picture look at the system. Zooming in a little bit closer, starting to see reports of freezing rain just north of Chatham, around areas like Stratford and Ingersoll. And that's a little bit of light snow now pushing its way into the west end of the GTA. We're likely to start off with that, followed by maybe some ice pellets, and then a brief period of freezing rain. Toronto now included in the freezing rain warning. This is issued by Environment Canada. We are also under a rainfall warning because of all that rain that is expected to fall later this afternoon and into the overnight. And that's as temperatures rise. That's not all. We've also got some very strong winds today. They're coming out of the east, sustained right now upwards of 30 kilometers per hour, gusting closer to 50K. Temperature is 0 at this hour in Toronto. That is cold enough for snow, also for the potential for freezing rain and ice pellets. Into this evening, want to mention one more thing, the risk of thunderstorms. And if we get those, that will certainly up our rainfall amounts as well. Risk of localized flooding through the day and night today. And then tomorrow, our temperature is set to soar. Lots to talk about here. We'll take you through the forecast coming up. For now, though, Nathan, I'll send it back to you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Tenants in an Ajax apartment complex could be looking for a new place to live.
The town is considering a plan to demolish an apartment building to make way for a 25-story mixed-use housing development. As CTV's Beth McDonnell reports, many who live there are on a fixed income and they are concerned where they'll go.
Oh, man.
For 7 years, Christy Bentley and her son Alex have made this Ajax apartment home. The rent, $1,100 a month. As a single mom who works at a grocery store, it's been a stable and affordable place to live until now.
It's terrifying. Like, my son shouldn't have to go through that because it's corporate greed. They just want more money and they don't care about us that are already living here. This is the letter we all received from Brosco Property Management.
Just over a week ago, Bentley received this letter from the building's property management company saying there is a plan for the low-rise walk-up to be demolished, making way for a 25-story mixed-use development. To make matters worse for her, the project is not going through the town's council approval process. Bill 109, the province's More Homes for Everyone Act, which passed in 2022 and aims to speed up building housing, allows staff to identify developments that already meet planning and zoning bylaws.
But I don't think it's right to be tearing down an existing building that houses almost 100 people to build it. Pick somewhere that is vacant.
The building is next to other high-rise rentals, but Bentley and the other tenants say many here are single parents, seniors, or have health issues and don't have the incomes to go anywhere else.
This won't be affordable housing when the 24 floors go up. You know, like, who can afford that?
I think that what the town needs to do is really just develop the other places that they've already either approved or have applications for.
The town's spokesperson says Ajax already had the authority to bypass council before Bill 109. The bill extended it across Ontario. She says the town has met with the developer and is committed to ensuring clear communication with affected tenants.
All the things that they're promised as tenants, making sure that they're very well aware of those things going forward so that they can head into the next steps with more certainty, because right now I can appreciate that it's a very emotionally charged situation.
Bentley is anxious and scared.
And for them to just kick us out on the street to build a building that is not going to be affordable for the average person, it's heartbreaking, it's terrifying.
We reached out to the property management company for comment, but did not hear back. The letter to tenants says they'll receive 4 months' notice to move out, along with compensation of 3 months' rent. Beth McDonnell, CTV News.
Returning now to our tariff coverage, Canada and many of its industries are on edge, waiting to see to what extent we are going to be hit by U.S. President Donald Trump's planned reciprocal tariffs. Let's bring in now CTV's Sarah Plowman, who is in New Brunswick today, where, Sarah, there are many lumber mills. It's a big industry there. What kind of impact might this have on the industry?
Hi, Michelle. People here are definitely bracing because it could have a big impact. And I want to remind viewers that the forestry sector here in Canada is already subject to duties for American exports. Part of a long-standing dispute over softwood lumber and how Canada, how Canada's industry works versus the United States. So we're already subject to these anti-dumping duties, and those are expected to go up anyway. And now there's this additional threat of the 25% tariff. I'm standing in front of Irving's Pulp and Paper Mill here in St. John, New Brunswick, which, by the way, has been deemed the most tariff-exposed city in Canada because of industries like this, because of Canada's largest oil refinery, because of the fisheries here. But here behind me, they make a certain type of pulp that's actually used for toilet paper and paper towel, and it's a key component of those items. And the United States doesn't have that same pulp, not to the extent that Canada does. They really rely on us. So basically, toilet paper that Americans use is made here, and given that there might be a tariff, there are concerns that the cost of toilet paper could go up, perhaps not a shortage like we saw during COVID when there was this panic buying. Some people don't expect that to happen, but really it just speaks to how widespread this could reach, everything from home construction to sawmills to woodlot owners to toilet paper. I was speaking with a woodlot owner earlier today who owns 500 acres. He sells his product to both sawmills and pulp and paper mills, and he's worried that if there's a tariff, he'll just keep getting squeezed. He says there's no margins for him, that he's concerned that businesses and people have to shut down because of this. So there's a lot at stake. Forestry in this province is the #1 contributor to the economy. But it's also a huge thing in so many other corners of this country. And so there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of people anxiously waiting to see what happens and see what the impact exactly will be.
Yes, so much uncertainty. And the New Brunswick Premier, just like our Premier here in Ontario, they've been trying to mitigate the potential impact. What has Susan Holt, the Premier there, been saying about how to respond?
Well, she's done things that a lot of other provinces have done. For example, the simple act of removing American alcohol from shelves, from saying that they won't do contracts with American companies, that sort of thing, and also going down to the United States for a seafood expo recently to try to really market and advertise what this province has to offer. So those sorts of things, as well as setting money aside in the budget for workers, for companies to try to diversify their markets. So, I mean, this province particularly is very tariff exposed, very connected to New England. It borders Maine, and there's a lot of industries, a lot of businesses even that go back and forth. In fact, there's one business in Edmundston, New Brunswick, Twin Rivers Paper Mill, pulp and paper mill, where on one side of the border, on the Canada side, you have a sawmill. And then the product goes across the river in a pipeline and is made into paper on the American side. That really speaks to the uniqueness of this province and the connection that we have. So Holt is actually speaking later today, and we'll hear more from her in terms of what her next steps are.
Our countries are so intertwined. It really is quite the situation. Sarah Plowman in St. John, New Brunswick. Appreciate the snapshot of what's happening out there. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the U.S. tariffs are dominating the campaign trail today, with the federal leaders talking about how they would respond.
Mark Carney's in Ottawa for meetings in his capacity as Prime Minister, but the other leaders are making campaign stops in Toronto and other cities. CTV's Scott Hirsch joins me now with more. And Scott, we've already heard from Pierre Poilievre and Jagmeet Singh today. What are they saying?
Nathan, of course, the message is clear, and it is the same from federal party leaders, that these tariffs are unjustified. They'll hurt people on both sides of the border. And, of course, Canada will not become the 51st state. But in terms of how the federal party leaders will respond, that is where the response gets different. So let's start with what we heard from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre this morning, how he says a Conservative government will respond to the threats of economic warfare coming from the Trump administration, saying there are three parts to this: the short, medium, and long-term plan. First and foremost, the need for an immediate response that is targeted for maximum impact on Americans. The medium response is more about tackling the dispute as soon as the election is done, and the long-term commitment to growing our economy, so ensuring we are never this vulnerable again. Now, focusing on the medium-term response, proposing to accelerate renegotiations of the CUSMA deal, setting a firm date to finalize a deal. Here's more from Pierre Poilievre.
We should set a firm date to finalize a new deal. And I will propose that both countries pause tariffs while we hammer out that deal. Keeping destructive tariffs in place kills jobs on both sides of the border and so serves no purpose at all. It does not make sense to go on killing jobs, disrupting markets, and weakening both our economies with on-again, off-again tariffs for months on end, as Canadian businesses and workers live in paralyzed terror.
And Nathan, for the NDP response, Jagmeet Singh focusing on Canadian workers, ensuring that they are the main focus throughout all of this, ensuring a robust EI to protect workers if job losses begin to mount, if these tariffs continue to cripple Canadian industries and potentially push us into a recession. And for his part, also proposing to take GST off essential items like internet and home heating to save people some money and to ensure that labor rights and universal health care are never on the bargaining table. Here's more from Jagmeet Singh.
The way we fight back against Donald Trump is doubling down on who we are as Canadians and our value that we are better off and we are stronger when we look out for one another.
So, of course, Nathan, we don't know exactly how severe the response will be from U.S. President Donald Trump as he announces reciprocal tariffs on a whole host of trading partners later this afternoon from the White House.
And Scott, what about Mark Carney? He's in Ottawa. What's he doing there?
Yeah, we do know that Mark Carney has paused his campaign to return to Ottawa to deal with the threat of economic warfare head on. What we do know on his schedule is that he does have two closed-door meetings, first with the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. relations, and then later in the day with the Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. relations. But we have heard from Mark Carney saying a tariff response will be deliberate in terms of measures to maximize impacts on American industries, rejecting all attempts to weaken Canada. What Canada's response will be will ultimately depend on how severe those tariffs are imposed on Canada, Nathan.
All right, CTV's Scott Hirsch with the very latest on the federal election campaign. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan.
Overseas now, in the Gaza Strip, hospital officials say Israeli strikes overnight and into today killed more than 40 people. Israel is expanding its military offensive in the Palestinian territory to seize what it calls large areas. The defense minister says the intent is to root out militants and capture areas that will be added to the security zones of Israel. The Israelis say there will also be extensive evacuation of the population from areas where there is fighting. No details were provided about which areas of Gaza would be taken in the expanded operation.
NATO allies have pledged more than $21 billion in military support for Ukraine. The alliance says the security challenges are too great for any one of its members to bear alone. NATO foreign ministers will meet in Brussels tomorrow and Friday to discuss further support for Ukraine. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will be there amid concerns by the other countries about America's change in policy toward Russia and questions about the future of the U.S.'s role in the alliance.
Myanmar's ruling military has declared a temporary ceasefire in the country's civil war to facilitate relief efforts following last week's earthquake. A man was pulled out alive from the rubble of a hotel in Myanmar more than 100 hours after Friday's devastating quake. He was rescued through a small hole around 12:30 this morning. The man was one of two people pulled from the lower two floors of the hotel. The death toll in the quake has risen to more than 3,000. Over 4,500 are injured.
NASA's Sphere X has turned its detectors on for the first time in space, and based on its first images, the telescope is working as expected. Each exposure includes 6 images. The bright spots are sources of light, like stars or galaxies. The Astrophysics Space Observatory is a survey telescope that takes a broad view of space. It will begin its official operations later this month, attempting to snap about 600 exposures each day.
Well, it could be a bit of a wild Wednesday of weather. We are tracking this low-pressure system moving now across southern Ontario, and we could be in for a little bit of everything here. Some snow, ice pellets, a brief period of freezing rain at the least, and then heavy rainfall coupled with maybe a few thunderstorms, and yeah, some strong winds in there too. You should plan on your afternoon drive being impacted by this. Might encounter some slippery roads, maybe some reduced visibility as a result of heavy downpours. Looking ahead to tomorrow, conditions are going to clear, and look at that forecast daytime high. 18 is what we're calling for. Friday looks pleasant too. We're going to take you through the long range forecast, including your weekend, after the break here on CTV News.
Well, there's a lot happening in the weather department on this Wednesday. The start of the day, not too bad, cool, definitely some wind, but we are anticipating quite a bit of rainfall, enough to warrant some alerts.
Yeah, you've got rain, freezing rain, possibly snow, quite a messy mix. So we're all kind of bracing ourselves, and plus people still getting over the ice storm.
Well, that's just it. And we could even encounter some thunderstorms today, which we typically associate with spring and summer, but then snow and ice pellets, often we associate that with winter. So a real collision of the seasons here today. And it's true, many areas still recovering from that weekend ice storm. I'm happy to say that any freezing rain we get today, not nearly as prolonged as what we had on Saturday, Sunday. However, again, many trees have been weakened by that recent ice storm, and couple that with the strong winds today, there might be some damage in some areas, also potential for some flooding. Weather is brought to you by the Pressler Law Firm Injury Lawyers. You don't pay unless they win. And today, yeah, it was a dry start to the day, but those winds, yeah, they picked up early on. You can see the white caps on Lake Ontario as those waves kicked up earlier today. A mostly cloudy start. We're not expecting to see the sun much at all today. And a brief period of freezing rain now likely for us too here in the city of Toronto. We are under the, not just a special weather statement, but the freezing rain warning that was issued yesterday. Widespread area, you can see anywhere from 2 to 5 millimeters of ice accretion expected this time. Some higher elevation areas north of Kitchener, Waterloo, Dundalk Highland areas could see a little bit more than that. Big story perhaps on top of the freezing rain is the amount of rainfall that could end up falling this time around. 30 to 50 millimeters by the time all is said and done. And in some cases, the ground is still quite frozen. A lot of that rain, the ground has a reduced ability to absorb that rainfall, so watch for runoff in many areas too. So we're starting to get some light snow creeping its way into especially the west and north ends of the GTA. This is a big low pressure system, so it's going to be with us really all day today through the overnight tonight. And then early tomorrow morning, we're still going to be feeling the impacts a little bit. Let's take you through the forecast radar. And I'm just going to pause this a couple of times here to show you, again, area of pink. That's some freezing rain. Looks like it's going to inch into the GTA early to mid-afternoon. Might stick around at times for the early part of the afternoon drive, but then by evening, temperatures should rise enough that we see a changeover from any freezing rain to simply rainfall. But you'll notice also some embedded thunderstorms expected in there. Overnight tonight, some dry periods, still unsettled though, pausing there around 7 a.m. tomorrow, so still the chance of showers early on, but the temperature will have climbed and it's going to continue to climb into your Thursday afternoon. Friday's looking like a beautiful day. Just want to point out that sunshine before we get back to this expected rainfall. So anywhere from 20 to 40 millimeters of rain generally expected. Some areas could end up seeing closer to about 50 millimeters, especially with a thunderstorm. And then ice, again, not so bad, maybe 2 millimeters in places like Kitchener and Orillia, closer to 4 in Shelburne and Owen Sound. Just to remind you, over the weekend, there was about 20 millimeters of ice build up on those trees in Peterborough and around Orillia. Winds coming out of the east today, they are expected to strengthen and they'll be coming out of the south through the overnight hours and into tomorrow, so that's going to warm us up. It's not exactly warm out there right now. 0 at this hour in Toronto, wind chill -7. Expect a rising temperature again through the overnight. Mainly sunny. We are expecting the temperature to be near seasonal, but we're going to get back into some rain once again. That's your look at the weather. Michelle, back to you.
Thanks, Lindsay. Well, there is a new exhibit at the Toronto Reference Library exploring the world of vintage postcards, many of which are being displayed for the very first time. That's where we find CTV's Jessica Smith with more. Hi, Jess.
Hi, Michelle. And there are some postcards here that date back to, the early 1800s, and they are just these iconic pieces of history. I'm here with Alicia Cheriel. You're with the Toronto Public Library and with the gallery itself. I was doing a walkthrough, and there are parts of Toronto that don't exist anymore because things have changed. But talk to me about why you guys wanted to bring this exhibit here to show some of these pieces of history.
Well, we wanted to make sure that we are always showcasing items from our special collections that might have some interest to not only our local public, but everybody in between. And we chose out of 26,500 postcards, 100 to display on scenes of Toronto, streetscapes, landscapes, buildings that don't exist anymore, as well as some of our more unique materials.
And it's really cool because these are like pieces of living history. I want to take everybody through to these silk ones because the silk ones are really cool. When you think about a postcard, you don't really think of the material of silk, and these are like kind of hand sewn. Why did you want to bring this piece in? Because when I think of a postcard, I think of the ones like you see the display on the wall, like the iconic pictures, but the silk ones are really special.
They were really, really quite rare, and a lot of them are hand-woven. You'll notice a lot of the ones that we have are dated kind of to the First World War era. So our assumption is that a lot of these would have been hand-woven by people from home, sent over to their soldier relatives. And then when technology got a little bit better, machine brocades used to become a little bit more popular. But yeah, these are really, really unique. You wouldn't send them like a typical postcard as well, so you'd have to send a little note inside of them and then put them in another envelope, so they kind of defeat the purpose of a normal postcard, but very, very cool to see.
And then we have ones that are themed for different times of the year. And I want to show the Halloween ones because I'm a Halloween fan, but these ones are a little spooky, I think, just because they're kind of retro. And you were saying to me off camera before that you guys have a lot of Halloween themed postcards.
We're not sure why they were so popular, but our librarians who worked on the show mentioned that Halloween just became a very popular time to create and distribute postcards. The one that I always like to point out is the one that says, "For Old Lang Syne this Halloween." And you kind of think of that and you think New Year's Eve, but it's just an old Scottish phrase from a Robbie Burns poem that just means for old time's sake. So it's interesting to see how even our language has evolved.
And it is so unique to see moments like you have the Great Fire of 1904. You have these moments in history that are literally captured. When it comes to telling the story of the city, is that something you wanted to include, some of the kind of monumental moments we've seen in the city?
Yeah, and we thought it was kind of weird to see them in a postcard form. You don't think a Great Fire is something you want to commemorate in postcard form. That fire in particular, at that time, around $10 million in damage. That's a lot of damage. And one of the buildings that was destroyed was Warwick & Brothers, which was a publisher of postcards. So we thought it was kind of important to include. You'll actually see some Warwick & Brothers in our show.
Now, this exhibit is entirely free to people. How long is it on for? When can people come check it out?
For sure. It's on until May 25th. We are open and free anytime the Toronto Reference Library is open. So we always encourage you to check tpl.ca if there's any service disruptions. Like tomorrow, we are closed for Bibliobash. But whenever the Reference Library is open, everybody is welcome to come.
You're all welcome to come in, and it's my favorite price, which is free. Alicia, thank you so much. I'm going to send things back inside to the studio.
All right, looks good. Thank you, Jess. At City Hall, officials are planning congestion on Toronto's roadways. If approved, the updated plan would explore opportunities to use more cameras for traffic violations that add to congestion. It would also look at escalating fees for construction-related road closures and add more traffic agents to more key traffic corridors. Separately, Mayor Olivia Chow requested the Infrastructure and Environment Committee consider increased enforcement of vehicles blocking streetcar traffic. This comes after the challenges seen after recent snowstorms.
Still ahead on CTV News, a new treatment offering a better quality of life to treat a rare disease that could weaken the body and affect anyone. Health is next. CIDP is a rare and degenerative disease that can have crippling effects on patients. There is a treatment option offering some relief.
But as CTV's Pauline Chan tells us, a new medication is offering better options.
I had tingling in both of my feet, then gradually numbness, then working its way up both legs, both hands from the fingertips, gradually working their way up into my arms.
It's called CIDP, chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, and 20 years ago it began robbing Daryl Bedford of the ability to play hockey, to run, and even to walk.
Sometimes they need walking aids, and sometimes they're bedridden if it's severe enough. So CIDP is very disabling.
Dr. Vera Brill says the cause is unknown and it affects people of any age, gender, or ethnic origin. The condition starts by attacking the myelin, or the fatty sheath protecting the nerves. Treatments in the past have included steroids like prednisone.
These drugs work very well, but they are hated by both the patients and the physicians because there's so many complications with them.
Daryl gets IV treatments every few weeks of immunoglobulin, a blood product that helps the body preserve its myelin. It's also given by subcutaneous injections, however that often causes big lumps in the injection area. But now there's a newly approved treatment in Canada called HyQvia, also given subcutaneously.
What that does is help break down the tissues surrounding the infusions and allow for faster absorption of the immunoglobulin. So that is why it's an improvement.
Daryl is doing well on his treatments. He can even skate again, but frequent IV sessions are a burden.
For me, it means that I need to schedule my life around my hospital visits, and I can't travel too far away if I know that treatment is coming up.
He's interested in trying HyQvia and maybe having a chance to travel again and enjoy a better quality of life. Pauline Chan, CTV News.
The union representing more than 60,000 nurses in the province is now in arbitration after contract talks with the Ontario Hospital Association failed. The Ontario Nurses Association is describing the development as infuriating, make that. It says its #1 priority is the implementation of nurse-to-patient staffing ratios. The union says having a maximum number of patients per nurse improves quality of care and saves money. the OHA has said is looking to innovate and said there was no one-size-fits-all approach to staffing. The arbitration hearing will wrap up tomorrow with the decision expected in the months ahead.
Tributes are pouring in from across the entertainment world. Hollywood star Val Kilmer has died after a battle with pneumonia.
You know that it would be untrue. Okay, sound-wise. You know that I will be alive.
Kilmer starred in some of the biggest movies in the 80s and 90s. Some of his credits include playing Jim Morrison in The Doors. He was also a fan favorite as Iceman in Top Gun and Doc Holliday in Tombstone. Kilmer's career was cut short after a battle with throat cancer, but he did come back for a scene in Top Gun Maverick, his final film appearance. Val Kilmer died yesterday in Los Angeles. He was 65. Still to come on CTV News, a woman visiting from India who did have travel insurance still got stuck with a hospital bill worth almost $100,000. We'll have that consumer alert after the break.
Get Toronto's top stories, breaking news alerts, and watch live. Download the CTV News app.
One key question as the new U.S. tariffs loom this afternoon will be how stock markets react. It's worth noting Donald Trump making his announcement after 4 o'clock when the markets close. But so far on this side of the border, the S&P Composite Index is up more than 100 points. And the Canadian dollar fluctuating a bit, but didn't diverge too much from just short of 70 cents U.S. For its part, the Dow Jones Industrial Index ticked up about 140 points as Wall Street waits to see how today's tariff decisions pan out.
Meanwhile, more than 3/4 of Canadian startups say tariffs will impact their businesses. A new survey from 2 Ontario tech hubs found 38% of those newer companies expect tariffs to have a direct impact on them, while another 38% are bracing for indirect effects. 41% foresee their 2025 revenue taking a hit. They join Canadian companies of all sizes, which have been taking steps to protect themselves from unpredictable tariff threats. When you leave Canada, you need to travel or get travel insurance in case you have a medical problem outside the country, and the same is true for people traveling here.
A woman from India was visiting her family in Brampton, and she ended up with a hospital bill of almost $100,000. CTV's Pat Foran has this consumer alert.
Joseph Christie of Brampton was excited his mother, Alice John, was able to come from India for 6 months on a super visa. A super visa allows parents and grandparents to stay in Canada for an extended period. When she arrived in January of last year, within a few days, she didn't feel well.
She started having symptoms of cough, shortness of breath, fever.
John was admitted to Hamilton General. There she was hospitalized for almost 3 weeks and placed on a ventilator. The family had purchased a basic super visa travel insurance plan with coverage up to $100,000. But after John was treated, it was determined she had a pre-existing condition and her claim was denied. The family was told, "You are not eligible for coverage under this policy if you have ever been diagnosed with congestive heart failure."
This came as a total surprise because the term congestive heart failure as a phrase is never in any of her prescriptions going back 3 years.
The family was told without coverage, they must pay medical bills totaling more than $96,000.
We felt really disappointed.
The type of policy they purchased is considered basic and it doesn't come with a questionnaire. Often the insurance company asks questions only after someone requires treatment.
If it says no pre-existing conditions covered, then anything they can find in the records that will reflect a problem that you might have ultimately had while you were in Canada won't be covered.
The family feels there was an oversight because they had no idea she had a heart issue. When CTV News reached out to Manulife, a spokesperson said sometimes unique situations come up where the interpretation of the medical file doesn't align with the contract. We've taken a closer look and given the circumstances, we'll pay the claim. Manulife has now agreed to pay the $96,000 medical bills, which was great news for the family.
We're really grateful to Pat Foran and the entire CTV team for taking on our story. Appreciate all the work that you do for your viewers. Thank you.
Pat Foran, CTV News.
Coming up, the Jays will be looking for another win when they wrap up their series against the Washington Nationals this afternoon. We've got your sports highlights after the break.
The Raptors were looking for a 5th straight win when they took on the Chicago Bulls last night.
Battle, the closeout by the rookie Buzelis. Here's Shed with the runner. Nice job that time.
The Bulls took an early lead and were able to hold off the Raptors. Chicago ended up winning the game 137-118. The Raps are back on the court tomorrow to play the Portland Trailblazers.
And the Blue Jays are looking for a 3rd straight win when they continued their series with the Washington Nationals last night.
Depending on what happens here. Bichette bounces it. Fair ball! Down the line, and it scores a couple.
The Jays took the lead in the 8th inning, and they were able to hold on for a 5-3 win. The team will wrap up their series this afternoon. The game gets underway just after 3.
The CFL has announced who will be the 15th commissioner in league history. Stuart Johnson says he is deeply humbled and profoundly honored by this incredible opportunity. The 54-year-old Toronto native served as president of TSN since 2010. He will assume his new role on April 24th. Johnson takes over from Randy Ambrosie, who announced in October his intention to retire this year once a successor was chosen.
All right, one more look at that forecast, and we know it's coming. It should be here right about now.
Yeah,
getting close.
We're starting to get flurries in parts of the GTA around Hamilton, Burlington, over now toward Pearson Airport. Let's take one more look at the satellite and radar imagery. And I want to point out the fact that we're also seeing signs of freezing rain in places like Mount Forest and Listowel. So still a little ways away from the GTA, but again, it's coming. And that purple you see at the bottom of the screen, likely ice pellets. As we make our way through the night tonight, it's not exactly a low. Our temperature is actually going to rise through the overnight hours, and then tomorrow we'll be up around 18 after a few showers early in the morning. It's actually looking like not a bad afternoon, and Friday looks lovely too. Lots of sunshine. Rain returns though for the weekend, so we have to get through today and that as well. Nathan and Michelle.
All right, thanks, Lindsay. And that's CTV News at noon. Remember, you can get Toronto's breaking news all day long on CP24 and at ctvnewstoronto.ca.
For Lindsay Morrison and the whole team here, have a pleasant afternoon. I'm Michelle Dubé.
And I'm Nathan Downer. Be sure to join us later for CTV News at 5 and 6. Have a great afternoon.